Ahead of the 2020 presidential elections, Arizona lost one of its key protections on voter integrity through federal regulations and voter forms. To learn more about this, I sat down with Dan Farley, Tea Party Phoenix Metro president, during an interview in Arizona. Let's jump into that now. Hey, Dan Farley, it's great having you on Crossroads.
Thank you very much for having me, Joshua.
Yeah, so again, we're here in Phoenix, Arizona. You're, of course, with the Tea Party out here, also some ties with the Republican Party. And you were telling me some interesting things. You know, as we're doing this interview, there are still a lot of questions about what happened with the elections. There are still recounts underway. There's calls for recounts. In Arizona, you have a call for an audit. I'm curious, though, because I understand that there were changes made to election laws here when it comes to federal elections that basically overrode protections and safeguards that were in place actually in Arizona to make sure the elections were more secure than they are now because of this. Can you tell us what happened back in 2013 with this?
Well, my understanding is that in 2002, there was an election assistance committee set up through the federal government, and you could register to vote through that form. And we had a Proposition 200 that passed that was trying to strengthen voter integrity, because we've seen this trend to erode voter integrity in the nation over the years. And then basically you had a tribal versus the state of Arizona challenging in the Supreme Court in 2013. And there have been ongoing challenges. In fact, I believe they're still even ongoing today. But the federal form only requires you to check off that you are an American citizen with no proof required. And in Arizona, Proposition 200 required you to be an American citizen in order to vote. Now, this may not be that much of an issue if the elections are decisive and voting and counting is clear and the number is small. But for this year, in this state, currently, President Trump and candidate Biden are only about 12,000 votes apart. So if these federal forms were used by people that are not citizens, they could effectively, I'm hearing numbers, it could be as high as 72,000. So how many of those are legitimate U.S. citizens and how many are not? And are our 11 electoral votes being stolen from American citizens in Arizona as a result? And can this occur in every state across the nation? Because this is the gray area. If you can cheat enough and then add these extra ballots, that's a major issue. So this is an issue, I think, for the nation. I think our nation is overdue to have a conversation about election integrity. And this issue should be front and center at the Election Assistance Committee. I understand that they got a chairman or a committee, the head guy of the committee that was going to do that, and then there was conflict within it. That should be a no-brainer. If you're an American citizen, you have to show your ID to cash a check. You have to show your ID to get a library book or anything else. This is the most important. This is the freedom of the country, the freedom of mankind, because we protect that around the world. And you don't need an ID at all. You can, in some states, you can do voter registration on the same day. How do you know that you're not having other people come in from other states and just trying to flip results? Particularly if you have a very populous state across the border. So these issues, I'm happy that we're talking about them this election. They're overdue to be talked about. There's nothing more critical to our republic than the assurance of election integrity. If your vote is disenfranchised or miscounted by a machine, or there's dead people voting it, or you have these federal forms that all erode voter integrity, what confidence that you have that you're not in a tyranny? And what an embarrassment our nation is to the world, might I add, because we're supposed to be the leaders of the free world with a voting thing. So if our election integrity is incredible, how can we, with a straight face, say to other countries, yours should be as well? That's kind of where we're at.
So at the time this proposition was passed that did create these safeguards in Arizona, what was the argument at that time for those safeguards?
Candidly, I started getting involved just over a decade ago, and I was not in a material part of that, so I have tried to brush up on that as much as I can and learn from others that have been in the party, but I don't have a lot of details to offer you on those debates.
And so in terms of those protections, what did that mean for Arizona, having those protections in place for your local elections?
Yeah, so what's wound up happening is today, what we're doing, whether or not it's appropriate, is the federal form still exists for them to run for federal office. But Arizona is safeguarding its state races, its county races, its city races, school board, all of that type of stuff. You have to prove that you're an Arizona resident and citizen, as I understand it. So, but you can still vote for federal elections with the federal form. So you have basically two parallel tracks, but one allows you more votes than the other if you prove you're an Arizona citizen. So we might be able to protect our state currently, but we are unable to protect our electoral votes and the leadership of our nation, which is the policies in which we build all of our economies and freedom and everything on anyway, you know?
So when the federal government said that this was going to be overridden, what happened at that time? On what basis did they override the local laws here on that?
Well, I think you'd have to look up that ruling. I understand that they wanted consistency for all their federal forms in all states. Now, the easy solution to that is you just require, because Kansas and Georgia was also a part of that, you just require that if you're going to use a federal form, you prove that you're an American citizen. Problem solved. Don't strip the voter integrity of the states that are trying to enforce it. Do you know there's more states in this nation that do not verify citizenship than those that do? That's alarming. That's very alarming.
Well, and on that too, we see it going the opposite way, where it seems that safeguards in place are being overruled when it comes to federal elections, but things that make the elections more loose, like what happened in Pennsylvania and some of the different changes to election laws that we had during the virus outbreak, those have been allowed to go through for the most part, although they're being challenged now legally. It does seem to be there's a double standard in some regards that, you know, removing protections on elections is somehow okay, but, you know, loosening the standards of it, you know, seems to be the way things are being done.
Well, I mean, look, I'm speaking for myself here. I'm just a citizen that's observing things around me. I observe the coverage in Davos, and I see multiple people talking about a reset in a global government type of structure. And then I see the president saying, well, no, the future belongs to patriots and to freedom. And I see one of the central figures that's pushing this, who's George Soros. He has this open society network, which seems to get tax benefits, potentially even government money. And he's got a history of collapsing currencies in other countries with debt, which also mirrors what he observed as a child through the Weimar Republic's currency collapsing. And I see so many of the same things happening to our own nation that happened within Nazi Germany. You have a collapse of the currency. You legalize drugs so people are apathetic about their freedom. Maybe you loosen, prostitution, and maybe you take gun control. Maybe you take control of the schools. So there's one school, one mantra that's being directed to your children. Maybe you take all these organizations. This is something that I'm seeing happen even within professional organizations. We've seen within the medical community, we knew hydroxychloroquine would help for a virus like this, yet we weren't able to use it as a therapeutic when it's been a safe drug for quite some time and it's over the counter. That doesn't make sense. Well, you have other doctors saying, well, we've had success using it, and this has been our experience with patients. Then you have big tech wiping that away. You have media covering that up. aren't we supposed to find truth for what's best for our citizens? And then you have even one of our US senators who's a doctor threatened to lose his medical license because he's outside of the narrative that matches. And you keep hearing about like politically correct and hate speech. And now you see like associations saying, well, if you're going to be a professional within our association and you say something like that on your own personal social media, then maybe we strip you of your ability to make your livelihood. This is a narrowing path. This is a moving of the goalposts. And if they're genuinely pushing for a global government, what better guise than a global pandemic to erase everybody's freedoms and keep moving the goalposts until all those freedoms are lost? I mean, we're in times where we have to ask ourselves a lot of questions. And I think first and foremost is, does our government represent our citizens? And I think the answer comes down to, are our elections trustworthy? And that is a legitimate discovery process we should go through in the next number of weeks. I think as all Americans, and if Biden's going to be the great uniter, shouldn't the American people know that he won that race legitimately? Because how does he unite if his legitimacy is in question? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and I believe that there should be federal standards on election integrity, starting with the federal form and verifying citizenship. That's my personal opinion.
Well, you brought up some interesting points when it comes to centralization. In my opinion, the way I see it, I think the real battle for this world right now is between freedom and socialism. And when people talk about socialism, they often only talk about it in the economic sense. They don't talk about it really from the standpoint of centralization, the other side of it, when you have expanding government power that can override basic freedoms of people like you and I. Whether it's, again, do you want to choose where your kids go to school? Do you want to decide how your kids are educated? Do you want to have options when it comes to the way you treat your health? Or do you want the government to be in control of your health and therefore your life? Do you believe that you should be able to defend yourself? Or do you think an external force needs to be in charge of that? Of course, we have rule of law, that's not challenging that, but the idea of whether you are responsible for yourself to a certain extent, even down to the idea of what are you allowed to think and what are you allowed to say. Already these things are being chipped away in this country. Already we're losing these things. I'm curious for you in terms of what America was, because I know that the Tea Party's really been trying to push, for what America used to be. How does this battle in your mind represent, what's happening in this country, this freedom versus socialism? What are your thoughts on this?
I must say I'm happy to see the emergence of Epoch Times and other conservative news organizations, because I don't have definitive proof of this, but it seems as though money is printed and circulated among a ruling class, and it seems like media organizations are taken over to deliver the same narrative. And I've noticed that there are things that are not covered, whether that be Benghazi during the Obama re-election campaign, whether that be the Hunter Biden computer. It's like you're watching two different worlds. If you're watching CNN and MSNBC, you're not aware of the other side of the argument, and that's very problematic. And so I believe that the public there's a ruse going on. I believe that the media seems to be supportive of big government, and I believe big government is promising things that we know it can't deliver. We've been going over $1 trillion in debt every year and monetizing that debt since 2009. And this year is going to be many times that because of COVID. And I've looked at what we've benefited from, in my view, has been we're living on the dividends and the legacy of the greatest generation that won World War II. They basically brought the gold, put it into Fort Knox, backed the dollar, buy gold, and then in time we associated oil with the dollar. So the dollar became the world's reserve currency. We've been very blessed to have that. And I understand it gives us between 20 and 25% more buying power as a result. But if you are promising things that can't be delivered, and we know that they can't, we're already going to have more outdraw than in for Social Security and Medicare in the next couple of years. And you're promising free college, you're promising free health care, and you're saying open borders at the same time. So how are we going to pay for free health care for everybody with open borders? Let's just talk about the open border situation. You have open borders, abolish ICE, defund police, take Second Amendment rights. How do we peace on the streets? How do you have election integrity if you have open borders? If you don't have border security, you don't have a nation. And so when you look at all these issues collectively and you realize that the left policies are higher taxes, more regulations, and duping uneducated people. I mean, they consistently want to make voting ages younger. They consistently want to create states where, or bring in people that don't understand our system without them going through the naturalization process to understand why we're successful. And so when you do that, you erode self-reliance. I think one of the things we should be talking about is voter integrity, and are we strengthening self-reliance? If we strengthen self-reliance, we strengthen freedom. If we strengthen freedom here, we strengthen it abroad. So what has this president done? He has strengthened our borders to strengthen integrity. He has strengthened our military to strengthen our standing in the world. He has strengthened our self-reliance in energy. So now we're not dependent on other nations for our energy. We're energy independent. Now we're moving manufacturing back. We can make our own PPE for medical stuff. That all strengthens self-reliance. That gives us control of our own lives. What is wrong with that? So those are the things that strengthen American strength and freedom. And I feel like the left lies and says, we're going to give you free stuff that they know is unsustainable. And the way that we're going to give you free stuff, how are you going to do that? If you destroy private industry with taxes and regulations, there aren't private sector taxes going in to pay for these things. So you take more out with government dependence, less money going in, and the whole system implodes on itself. That's the direction we're going. You can't miss it. It's as bright as day. It's just other people are not aware of that because they're told Republicans are racist, or that if you've got a private business, you're greedy, not understanding most small businesses are the last one, the entrepreneurs are the last ones paid working the longest hours. They're the ones that are keeping people employed. You create these regulations, you create these COVID lockdowns, you put all these small businesses out of business, you make them government dependent, and then you centralize, like an oligarchy, or you centralize cronyism in big companies. And then the big companies say, oh, well, I benefit in the short term, until the alligator eats you last. The more powerful you make the government, the more all of our freedom is at risk. We should be strengthening individuals and individual self-governance. So that's what the Tea Party is about. It's about fiscal responsibility, so then we don't put our currency at risk. It's about the constitutional values and disseminating those. And so that's why I align myself with the Tea Party. It was bigger during the Obama administration than it is today. But that doesn't mean that these values aren't any less important today than they were when Obama was president. We still need to be talking about them. We still need to be empowering for self-reliance for each other, helping each other become precinct committeemen, helping each other run for office. So it's not top down. So they don't keep changing the rules so you can never get them out of office. Then when you have a disenfranchised voter, what accountability does that politician have to the voter? That politician, if they can cheat in elections, that politician is not going to worry about its constituents. It's going to worry about itself, him or herself, and worry about its special interests that are enriching them. And we see a lot of that.
I guess just last question. In terms of where the country's at right now with the elections, there's massive public distrust in the institutions that have determined, who's the next president, whether you're right or left. The Democrats right now are relatively happy. They think, their media is saying everyone won, even though the media is really basing that just on, let's say, very early very early statements, because as we know, votes are still being counted, as we know there are still recounts, and as we know there are serious legal challenges involved, which do have a chance of turning things around, pretty strong one, I'd say. Now, in addition to this, right, I think if it does go against their interests, they're going to call out election integrity just the same. The integrity of our government, the system of government we have chosen for this country, the ability of people like you and I to determine who our leaders are, that is being destabilized. And the outcome of this election could lead the United States and the whole world in very almost polar opposite directions, according to what you've been describing. I guess if you were to leave us with one thought, what would you hope people understand about this current time?
Well, I believe the integrity of our elections is essential to the integrity of our republic. So, in my view, I think we should look closely at if there are problems in our election system, what they are, and what it will take to correct and resolve those, so we can have confidence in our government and confidence that our elected officials are the ones that we've actually selected. So I would just say let the process play out. Let the Constitution be the supreme law of the land, and let's try and make sure that there's consistency for all states, and that it's American citizens' votes that are the ones that are being counted. That's how you ensure that you have a republic of we the people.
It's a real pleasure having you on Crossroads. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.